All right, well, hello there, it's Celeste Carmichael, and I'm here with Lori Brewer, and we're just going to walk through reporting for some of the Master Gardener volunteer programs. So, Lori, you're going to kind of help me to know what something might look like, or what an educator might be trying to enter in as a Master Gardener volunteer coordinator, or what we might start with is by looking at a Master Gardener program data from last year and just kind of see what might be there in the system. How's that sound?
Yeah. And where they, that sounds good.
So is there a particular county that might have a lot of Master Gardener content?
That I can't say.
I'm thinking, I know what, Saratoga County, Ontario County, Erie County.
Putnam. We'll pick on Jen in Putnam County.
Putnam County, okay.
Let's just see, because we know her.
So for those of you, if you're watching this, what I did was I went to the search button and then indirect contacts. You'll just see your county program listed there. And so I'm on Putnam, and I'm going to look for last year's data. Looks like Go Putnam. There's a lot of data in there for 2017, but we're going to reflect back on last year. Sometimes that's a good way to kind of figure out how something has happened. And then choose the program that your Master Gardener volunteer program is listed in, which Putnam County calls it the Master Gardener Volunteer Program. That sounds like a reasonable title, right? Okay, so you can kind of see what's in here. It pulls up a spreadsheet. This is all the data that was entered for 2016 for the Master Gardener Volunteer Program. And you can see each of the columns in the spreadsheet are searchable. So if I click on any one, like event type, it will organize the event type information together. Or name description, you can see the dates and how the dates are listed. Duration is how many hours an event happened for, number of events, and individuals reached. And so what I always like to say is this data, each data point tells a little bit of a story. So let's see if we can, I heard this is kind of funny because Jen Lerner is not on the call right now, but we'll see if I'm anywhere near the right story that this data point told. So in the Master Gardener Volunteer Program in Putnam County on October 22nd of 2015, so this was part of last year's data set, there was an herb preservation program held at Brewster Library. It was one event, about an hour and a half long, and lecture style presentation, and you can see 4 females attended. 1 was Hispanic Latino, 3 were non-Hispanic Latino, and they were all white. So the data point tells a little bit of a story, and kind of having that in mind as you are preparing to enter your data, I think is really super helpful. You know, so as you look at what you have in there, ask yourself, does this tell the right story? And if it does, it tell a story that we want to change for next year, you know, like that information might help you to know how to recruit participants and volunteers and that sort of thing. And by looking at the volunteer column, it looks like that's on 0, so this may be a program that was taught by staff. So,
great.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a specific event that they entered into the database. But prior to even entering an event, they had the Master Gardener Volunteer Program already defined.
They did, yeah.
So I wonder if people are how do they, one, define a program and or redefine a program?
Right. So from there, if you saw, I kind of picked that Manage button and then chose Programs. And when you do that, you'll see all of your county programs for your particular county. And, you know, so you have to kind of think, these are like the buckets, right? So what do each of your programs or your responsibilities fall into? And if you have a Master Gardener Volunteer Program, you may have something in a bucket called Master Gardener Volunteer Program, and then it relates to some particular outcomes. So in Jen's case, land use and public and residential spaces, environment and natural resources, and healthy eating and active living. And if I wanted more detail on that, I could push this little program indicators hand lens.
Magnifying
Magnifying glass, thank you. See if that
So,
will come up
so
for us.
I have some questions about those program indicators. But before we go there, if somebody looked at their county and saw that they their program wasn't defined, they didn't have a Master Gardener Volunteer program in there, how would they get it in the list? So Putnam County already has.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy to add. We can look at that in just a second. I do think it's important though that you, especially if you're a new staff member or maybe you have done things in reporting, and this is a no judgment, no judgment call here, but if you've done something in the program to just kind of choose things because you needed to move on, looking at your outcomes to make sure that they're right on is always a good thing because you actually have to report against these outcomes as well. And I think that these are some pretty typical outcomes that might be chosen for the Master Gardener Volunteer Program, but I'm just suggesting that it's not a bad idea to take a peek and see what those outcomes say for if you already have a Master Gardener Volunteer Program.
Yeah, and I'm gonna sort of add a little bit to that. So these outcomes, there is a document that has all of the outcomes in one location.
There is, and I'll just kind of point that out. So on the home page of the Program Development and Reporting tool, there's a link to the CCE statewide plans of work.
Yeah, and so if you click on that statewide plan of work, all of the programmatic areas, the complete list of 6. Well, actually, let's not jump to 6 because that'll be a big document. For the Master Gardener Volunteer Program, what we're suggesting is, as your primary emphasis, that if you're unsure of where to start, that the place to start is to go to the individual statewide plan number 6, the Community and Economic Vitality. And this is 10 pages long, and if we scroll all the way down to land, lots of information here. Information in which, if you're writing a success story, you might be able to just pull.
Right, if you're writing a grant proposal, actually,
you might just pull from that.
There's some good content in here.
So if we keep moving down, I think it's to 6.7, 6.2.
And I'll just point out that the things that are highlighted in here, those are the outcome indicators that you're actually reporting against in your reporting. So
there was land use and public spaces, but we've made up. No, if you keep going, actually, I think it's 6.9. Land use and residential spaces. So it's all land use and public spaces. This is land use and residential spaces. So if you look at this one was tailored with what we really do in our Master Gardener Volunteer programs. Is we are looking at, you see the highlighted ones, we are looking at what residents are doing, the tactics they're employing in the management of homes, lawns, gardens, and landscapes. And we include homes in there because we understand that some programs deal with pests inside the home. And so this really, I think pretty much everything our Master Gardener Volunteer programs are engaged in would fit under this category. So that's why we're saying if you're not sure what to choose as your main emphasis, choose this one. And if you look at the notes underneath this, we give you some guidance on where you might do other different emphasis, which there's a main emphasis and then you could pick additional ones, up to 3. Mm-hmm. So some people might decide that they are focused on biodiversity, natural resource protection, and might consider the climate change objectives, or it says or 3.7. So sorry, there's that actually is related to the environment and natural resource and sustainable energy objective, which if you're focused on compost waste management, that might be another emphasis. And then if you're doing stuff related to growing food in community spaces or residential spaces, maybe you'd like to look towards the plan of work number 4. There is one there related to nutrition, food safety, security, and obesity prevention. 4.4 actually specifically mentions gardening as a strategy for helping people address food security. So we if you have no idea, go with 6.9, land use and residential spaces, and then you might think about these other areas of emphasis based on what you are doing.
All right, let me see if I can find, there we are. Okay, so again, that's just in the quick links. There's lots of ways to get to the statewide plans of work, but while you're here in this particular app, that's a good place to find it. So thank you for mentioning that, Lori. So if you find that you look at your programs and you do not see Master Gardener Volunteer Program in your list of of your buckets here of program goals and program titles, you may want to add one, and you just can do that by clicking on Add New Program. And it'll ask you, are you sure this hasn't been a program before? And you can kind of look at your list of things that may have been listed with a Master Gardener title before, or maybe you're sure that this is a brand new program, and you click on, yep, it's a brand new program. Give it a title. And what about the description, Lori?
Yeah, first on the title, I'm very happy that Putnam County chose Master Gardener Volunteer Program, that full 4-word phrase, because it will make it easier if we want to do a statewide look at Master Gardener Volunteer programs. If you all are naming it the exact same, it could make easier for us to go pull that information out of the larger database that is accumulating from the reporting.
Absolutely. The other thing that will make it easier is after you name the program, and you're going to talk a little bit about the description.
Yeah, we'll talk
in a
about
minute.
the description.
But if you click on the little button that says Master Gardener, there's a list of potential statewide, mostly volunteer effort programs that if we are thoughtful about tagging your program with the right language here, then it makes it easier for us to look back and take a statewide peek at participation and outcomes.
So actually, if you could go, rather than create a new one, could we go back and look at Putnam County's description of the Master Gardener Volunteer Program?
Sure can.
So you can edit it, looks like.
Yeah.
So if you already have Master Gardener Program in there some way and it doesn't use these 4 words, you could edit it. That would be greatly appreciated. But it looks like Putnam County didn't put a definition in. So I guess the definition must be optional.
Yes,
and
it is. Yeah.
One of the things that we recently, I think many of you are aware of, we recently created our mission, vision, value statements for the Master Gardener Volunteer Network. And so my thought is maybe we can use a portion of our mission statement as the description.
I think that's a great idea. I am just looking up to see if I have that right there.
Oh, I have it. Maybe I could put it in the chat box. Would that be helpful?
Sure. There's a link to it.
Well, I don't actually have we haven't posted it anywhere.
Oh, okay.
So I think that we could. I actually was wondering if there's a way. There's a way to put any extra. Maybe in the future we'll have a link to the exact thing there. My apologies. I was trying to find it on my. So I have the document, and I'll post the document in our online resource library. But let me see if I can put it in the chat box. How do I see that? Oh, there we go. So this is a mission statement I just dumped into the chat box of the Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you are good. There we go. So we should be able to just drop it right in there. Look at that.
Yeah, and Jen won't mind that we added to her. So if you want to put in a definition, and I think we probably want to come up with a common way of defining it too, this is the mission statement. We prepare volunteers to be peer educators who build relationships with community audience to integrate local experience and research-based knowledge in planning for and initiating steps to manage gardens, lawns, and landscapes with an emphasis on food security and environmental stewardship. it could be that there's an aspect of that your program doesn't focus on, but I think it's pretty comprehensive. I think it's probably inclusive of all of our programs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to make sure you click save as you're adding something. So then when you go back in to look at that, there you go.
Yeah.
You have a nice description.
So we have that description, and
maybe you can send it out to the...
I'll include it when we include this
the link
recording.
To this recording.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry.
All right. So, okay, let me back out of here. So you got your program called Master Gardener Volunteer Program. You have a description, a little bit of background about the emphasis area. That's step one, right?
Yes, and you name the program, define it, choose emphasis areas.
Yep, and then the next thing you're going to want to do is add content. So adding indirects. So not everybody really, I think, recognizes what an indirect is, but indirect is basically media. So how are you growing your program? It answers that question. How are you reaching out? Like, so if you know who your audience that you want to reach, like what are they most likely to see, read, listen to, cross paths with, and think about who they might be. So beyond the audience that comes into your door, knocks on the door, comes to your office hours or whatever, now who are those people and how can you reach them? That's what indirects are supposed to, and that's why we report them, because NIFA asks us, how are you growing your audience? How are you growing our groupies and extension, people who want to come and learn and change their behaviors. So as you're thinking about that, it is helpful to look back in the previous year and see how you've defined that information. It might also be helpful to see, I'm going to go back to my home page here and open up. Every year I send out an FAQ of just information on how to report and answering frequently asked questions. So what I just pulled up was this year's FAQ, and there's a section in here about indirects and how indirects are calculated, along with an example of if my boots were on the ground in your county. So if I was working in a county and was a county educator, how could I do this so that it wasn't going to kill me in terms of entering data, yet still get some good information, not just so you get it done, you get the indirects in there, but also so that next year, when it's time to report indirects, that you have a sense of what it is that you did in this current year, or thinking about how you use that data so you can plan forward. So the example that's here, this Onondaga County example, does that. There's 5 different ways that you can reach out through media. Internet, maybe an old way of categorizing that, but that's what we got to work with. Print media, public display, radio, and television. And you can see what I did was I just entered all of the different ways that we use the internet in this false example here. I said CCE Onondaga County website, Facebook presence, Twitter feed, all right? And then use your best measures to figure out what the reach of these things are. And so same thing, Country Folks in Syracuse for print media, those are newspapers. 163,000 was the circulation rate. Do I know that all of those 163,000 people read whatever it is that we wrote? Of course not. Indirects are nice round numbers that are really intended to help you as the educator to think about who your potential audience is. And public display, this is the one that always gets people, especially those Master Gardener volunteer programs, I think, because oftentimes Master Gardener volunteers are at farmers markets or tabling exhibits or festivals. It's hard to know where to put that information. It's really considered indirect because we don't have number one, we don't have a way of measuring direct impact. Also, because it's not an intended or a registered audience, if you will. So you can't follow up with people. If in the event, so you go to State Fair, you have a booth, 125,000 people came by your booth. That 125,000, if you have some kind of way of measuring that or thinking through how many people may have come across your booth, that that could go in the indirects, and maybe 5 of them sat and talked with you long enough that they left their address, and they're planning to follow up and get on your get your newsletter, or sign up for more participation. So those 5 may be considered direct participants, but that seems to be a frequently asked question, especially for Master Gardener volunteer programs, is where do we put the activity that we had at the farmer's market or whatever. And people don't like to put them in indirect because they feel like you've had conversations, but unless you can follow up with the people, they really belong in that indirect or media section of our reporting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so it might be in the future, if they're at a tabling event or farmer's market and they had a conversation with somebody, they could just have a sheet where, like, I had a conversation with Sue Johnson.
Right.
And what if the person doesn't want to share their contact information?
Yeah, I think that still belongs in the indirect.
Okay.
Then. Yeah.
Okay.
Direct is you directly know who you talk to.
Right. Even if they'll give
them.
you their name, but they won't give you their contact. So,
right.
So it's almost like if you have a conversation with them and you say, "Can I have your name and a way of contacting you?" And if they volunteer that, then you can count them as
your mailing list.
Right.
Right.
Can you? Or if a county doesn't have a mailing list, just our information.
Right. Yeah.
In case we have to follow up with you, would you be willing to provide your name and a contact?
Right. Yeah. It's following up for evaluation purposes, right?
Yeah.
Planned programs. That's why it's called a planned program. So if you have a planned audience and you can follow up with them and evaluate the experience, so on and so forth. So it's not because it's invaluable. In fact, if we didn't have indirects, we wouldn't have anybody new coming to our table ever, or to our door, or to our virtual door, or whatever. So indirects are really important, but don't kill yourself to get those numbers. Just do the best that you can. And don't kill yourself to put in, each and every stinking news release you put in, unless your ED says that you have to. That's not important to us. What's important is that you're really considering for your program in a given year, if the Master Gardener volunteer program is putting on a workshop, how do you push the word out? And that's what this should represent. So for any given event, you may have this kind of reach.
And then for any given event, you might have this kind of reach as well as a separate entry for direct.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All right. So let me there we go. So that all goes in the indirect. I'm not going to go into the details of how to enter that data in. That's actually all in the FAQ, and that part is pretty simple. I think the harder part is thinking about it than actually doing it. The direct contacts are very much the bread and butter of what we do: workshops, trainings, tours, that sort of thing. Planned events where people are registering, they're coming, they're participating. It may be an hour or more kind of event, and you'll be able to follow up with them either right there on the spot or 6 months from now to do some kind of an evaluation. And so just know that these are toggle buttons on almost every section of this. So ask yourself, was it an event or a direct contact? Individual direct contact might be somebody coming to your office for identification of an insect or something like that. Whereas program event might be a workshop that you.
Oh, okay. And so that's a good question. So individual direct content, if I'm talking I'm a tabling event and I'm having these basically office hours out in the public, that would be an individual contact. Okay.
Yep. And then it asks you, are you going to enter it by web form or importing from a spreadsheet? So over the last 5 years, we have really seen a jump in the number of people that are comfortable importing from a spreadsheet. It is simple. It's a little quirky, so it takes some time to get used to, but there are some good directions on how to do that. And importing from a spreadsheet means that you're keeping track of all of your directs separately in some kind of a spreadsheet. Doesn't really matter exactly how it's formatted. We can figure out how to map it to this particular reporting system. Again, I'm not going to go into details on that. There are some good directions, and I'm here if anybody has any questions. But oftentimes people are putting details in through the web form. It's asking what year are we on. So I think it should be that only the data from the current year will go in, but just in case, make sure that it's there, and then your county will pop up directly. We're still picking up on Putnam County here. And then it asks, is it a single occurrence or a series of related occurrences? Single occurrence might be one workshop. Series of related occurrences might be, well, might be your Master Gardener Volunteer Training Program, right? So you have 12 people in your
If you did a day-long conference, would that be a series? Because you would have multiple.
I would.
You just put it in as a conference.
Just put it in as
okay.
a conference. Either way, you're going to be able to.
Not under the individual topic. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and then the detail of the data collected. Individual information means that you're going to give person by person information, which is really time consuming in a web form, but if you're pulling it from, maybe you have a spreadsheet that you're tracking all of those things on, it's a little bit easier. But typically what people are using when they're doing a web form is a group or head count information, so it'll be your total numbers. And then it asks what program is it connected to. So in this case, it's our Master Gardener Volunteer Program. Next up, the event name. And I'll just, for now, I'm just going to call it workshop. But Good Data has a little bit of detail in there, you know, so it might be the title of your workshop, just like what we looked at when under the search button. Event date would be the date of your event. So I'm just going to pick a date. And then it asks, is it community outreach, professional development for volunteers, or individual direct contact? And so community outreach would be anything for the public. Professional development for volunteers would be training for your Master Gardener volunteers. We'll leave that at community outreach. What was it? I'm just going to say a workshop for right now. And an event duration. So a day-long conference or training might be 6 or 7 hours. Typical workshop might be 2.
So it seems to me if you have a lot of volunteers who are helping with the outreach program, that you might want to have a little cheat sheet for them to fill out and submit back to you.
Yeah, so I'll, let me, actually this is the last page of that, but we do have forms that they could fill, you know, you could just print out and have them fill out and give back to you. And because basically it's the same information that you would fill out, but it makes it easier, I think, for the volunteers.
And it's also getting me to wonder if that should be the way we collect volunteer hours, is using that same forms, and then the volunteers write their hours right on that form.
Right. Well, yeah. So right in here, you know, so if you have volunteers that are teaching the workshop, they would be counted under volunteer numbers here. Quirky thing here to note is the number of male plus female. So the number of participants should equal the number of Hispanic, non-Hispanic. That's the ethnicity. So if I had 5 and 1 here, so that's 6 people total. And if 3 were Hispanic and 3 were non-Hispanic, 6 people total. And then a total on your race should also equal 6. Okay, if it doesn't happen that way, you're going to get an error, and that's true for any of the columns. Okay, so I'm not going to save this, obviously, but just so you know, it's pretty simple. The web form is pretty simple, and the upload is... and
if you only know male and female and don't know the other information,
you have to fill it in, or this one can be other, which is kind of like, I don't know.
I didn't. And
Hispanic, non-Hispanic, we don't have an other right now. I anticipate that that's going to happen because we did go through we went through the review, this civil rights review this last summer with 4-H data, and one of the things that they said is, you know, we shouldn't be guessing. We should know this information.
Okay, so that was my follow-up, is we shouldn't guess. We should put other.
Right.
We either should get the information from the individual.
Self-reporting is the best way to do it.
And if we didn't get the information, we shouldn't speculate.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So going back to the FAQ, I'm going to show you there's 2 things here. One is we have a community of learning, which is in Moodle, which has all kinds of content and resources. And then there's also help guides right within the program reporting and program development and reporting tool. And those are really specific to entering your data. So let me go to this Moodle page here, this community of learning. And what you're going to see in here, and anybody can go in here, any of your staff can go in here, is it's actually, it will all be collapsed when you go in. It won't be so long, but because I'm in as me, what I wanted to show you is at the very end is a section on useful forms. And there's a folder. And there's a sample group enrollment form and a sample program participant form. So let me just show you that group enrollment form. And there's also a sign-in sheet, which would help you get that self-reported data. This would be useful probably for your Master Gardener volunteers to have this, and for your staff to have it. So you fill out the basic stuff at the top, and then they complete the bottom, including the volunteer section, and then turn it into a staff member, and it's ready to enter.
Right, because then you get their hours as well as.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Didn't really think about that. We keep learning, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a sample sign-in sheet here as well. And all of these samples actually come from they come from one of our counties that are doing, if we catch somebody doing something right, we just tend to promote those. And so I'm just going to pull this over here just a second. There you go. Can you see that on your screen now? There you go. So I happen to live in Cayuga County, so I'm a participant in a lot of cooperative extension programs in Cayuga County, just as a mom mostly. I've had to fill out a lot of these as I'm signing in. And so some educators actually go, oh, I don't want to make people fill that out. But as a participant, I know that we're asking for this information because we need the demographic information. And it doesn't bother me. And if I was really frustrated with any of it, I would just sign my name, and in this case it's for 4-H, so club and group, fill that information out, and that's it. But it's I have seen it used and did not be a practice that seems to bother people. So
because they can choose to fill out as much as they want.
Exactly, right. Yep.
Excellent. So that that's sort of how people do it. And some counties programs will go in and enter the information as not at the end of the year, because you can get in there all the time.
Yes,
you can enter it weekly, daily. Your whole life could revolve around this.
Well, I'm not saying that, no. But it is easier. Like, you can save yourself a lot of stress by doing this on a regular basis, a monthly basis, or a quarterly basis, or whatever. And that helps you too, because then your program, your executive director, your association can talk about the numbers reached and the impacts reached more regularly. So the last thing that I pulled up here is the program outcomes, again under manage and then outcomes, and these outcomes relate back to how we defined our program. So it pulls out the outcomes and you have to report on. It'll give you a summary of what's been entered in so far, and it asks you to report on how many, the change in practices and behavior for your particular program. And that's as easy as just putting your number in there. And when you're filling it out, there'll be a little save button on the bottom.
What will this number be?
That's based on evaluations, right? So it asks number of ag, natural resource producers, blah, 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 documented to have modified existing practices and technologies to assist with natural resource management practice. So if that was an outcome, if that was a goal for your particular program, how would you assess that? And it's going to be different for each program.
Oh, I see. So this gives you basically outputs. The first chart gives you outputs, but when you put in those outputs, that you can't check which program is affiliated, outcome it's affiliated with.
You do. So you say, okay, Master Gardener Volunteer Program, and they picked 3.6, 4.1, and 6.6. You don't have to fill, you get the whole bunch. Like, you get a batch, right, of outcome indicators. And so not all of these may be relevant for your program, but if you picked 3 of them, then you probably have something for each of them. And you have to kind of think through, what did I do? How did we evaluate this? If somebody came back to me and said, wow, that's really fantastic. You had 369 people in your programs and 350 of them changed their, let's just for an example, modified their existing practices or technologies assisting natural resource management. How did you do that? That's fascinating. Then, you'll probably have some kind of story about how you evaluated that. you know, and maybe, you know, what measures you used, if it was a survey, or if you looked for change in practice, or people demonstrated something, or, you know, whatever. But unfortunately, it actually works better when that's not dictated, because all of our programs are slightly different. But these outcome indicators could certainly help you to shape your program. If this is really what you want to have happen, demonstrated knowledge or skill gains related to healthy eating and active living, then that might shape, what am I going to do this year? You know, for this, we're really going to focus on how are we going to use the Master Gardener Volunteer Program to really get there, and then how are we going to measure it?
Excellent. So it's really reporting is a two-step process. It's one, reporting the numbers, people who showed up, people in the seats, people you might have interacted with directly or indirectly. And then there is, of those people you interacted with, how many did you follow up with to determine if you achieved the outcomes you were looking for? Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as three-step. How'd you grow your audience? So that's it.
Okay, that's the first one.
Right. How many showed up? And then of those that showed up,
how many did you follow up?
How many changed their practices, their behaviors, what they learned based on what they learned from you?
And so any stage that a county is at, they may not be able to tackle, depending on where they're at right now, they may not be tackling all three of these right now. So somebody might not actually report these outcomes because they're like, oh my gosh, we really are falling behind on that evaluation. But it should not prevent them from filling out the other stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, you know, I bet there's some of these that are really low hanging fruit, you know. So youth participants documented to have applied. So if you were doing a gardening program with a school, right, and part of it was creating a healthy meal with,
they did it well by
with the food that they grew, and they had some conversation about it, I bet you're probably at 100%, right? Or
right. So basically, if you incorporate some of these outcomes into the event,
into the program plans, right?
Into the program plans, or into whatever thing, then you could have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Excellent. And all three steps are just in this summary in this program outcomes page. Your indirects, so how you grew your audience, your total direct, how many people came, and then your outcomes. So
excellent.
Yeah, there you go.
Piece of cake.
The good thing is that we're here to support our staff, right? You know, I think either of us are just ready to jump in and help you think through this. And I always say that, you know, as much as reporting is required, but how you report is a no judgment zone. We're going to take you from where you're at and help you, and not make anybody feel guilty about anything, but just move it forward, because good program planning leads to good program reporting. Good program reporting leads to us be able to write some proposals and really generate some interest and some additional dollars. So,
excellent. All good. Good. All right.
I enjoy,
everyone.
Yeah.